Welcome back. I'm your host, Renata McElveny, a creativity coach for neurodivergent and multi passionate women of color. And in this show, we talk about all things creativity as they relate to our self discovery and healing journey. Let's get started. In today's show, I want to share with you how I balance multiple responsibilities while prioritizing my creative self care. I want to share with you my approach, some of my experiences, and the way that this shows up in my day to day life. My intention with this episode is to show you that I'm still a work in progress, just like you. I haven't figured it out, and I still have to prioritize my creative time daily to make it happen. So, a great place to start is by giving you a little bit of context of what my journey with creativity has looked like. And I have shared in other episodes that I have been creating for a really long time. I have always had to juggle multiple things. It's not like I've only had time to create and that's it. Like I've always had things going on around me. And so this idea of like juggling things is very natural for me at this point because it's what I've always done, and I've come to see it as a part of the process, that part of the role of my creativity is to be able to support me along my life, along my journey, and all the things that I'm doing. So the creativity is an outlet for me to tune in back to myself, to be able to relax, to unwind. But it wasn't always like this. I went to school for art, and during that time, I felt a lot of pressure to get work done, to be productive, to be very intellectual with my creativity. And although I don't regret studying art and exploring a bunch of different mediums and learning in a traditional sense, one of the things that I come back to often is the real intention of why I started to create in the first place. And really is because I love how I feel when I create. And what I noticed when I got caught up in the productivity side of creativity was that I stopped enjoying myself. I stopped trusting myself. I didn't really pay attention to what I wanted to say or what I wanted to experience while creating. And I got really caught up in trying to do what other people were doing and wanting to take more and more art classes and constantly be in learning mode, but never really tuning into myself and allowing the process to be enough for me. The other thing that I struggled with for a long time was guilt when it came to my creativity. And this obviously stems from my experience feeling like I had to justify being creative, that it wasn't enough to just create for my own joy. I had to prove that it was worthwhile doing because I didn't grow up with people around me who did this, and it felt selfish and it felt overindulgent. And so I felt like I always had to be doing more to, yeah, to justify that this was worthwhile. And I know this is a common experience that other people go through because this is really the only thing that we see when it comes to art, especially when we are trying to explore and we're trying to learn about it. It feels like everybody approaches creativity from a place of productivity and having to achieve things. And it's hard to step back and actually allow yourself just to enjoy what you're doing because it's a fun thing to do. Bottom line, what I realized is that for me, the whole point of creating is to enjoy my time doing it, and I had to lower my expectations and focus on the process of creating instead of the results. And when I made this shift, which was recently, I felt so much better. It felt better aligned with the type of person that I am and what I care about in this life. And for me, creating for my own joy is a huge priority at this point. And I have stopped trying to be better or learn more or take more classes. And this is not to say or discourage anybody from taking classes, but what I'm saying is that at some point you do have to step back and pause, and instead of looking around at what everybody tells you to do or how you should do it, you need to look within yourself and ask yourself, what is it that I want to share? What is it that I want to explore? How do I want to feel as I make things? This is the biggest lesson that I've taken from my own journey. So I hope that's helpful to you too as you're thinking about this. Now, let me talk a little bit about how I bring creativity into my day to day life without it feeling like it's another thing on my to do list. This is all about creating small moments for creativity. And although I often talk about visual art because that's like the main tool that we use, that I use in my coaching practice with clients and to help people to kickstart this process. There are other things that we can do to support our creativity that don't take a lot of time. And if anything, they actually are small habits that we can build into our routines. And this is something like going for a walk so that you can relax and just like daydreaming, tune into yourself. This is a great way to practice getting in touch with our imagination and our curiosity. The other thing that I love to do is creating playlists with music that I enjoy that put me into different moods because sometimes I feel like I want to be creative. Some other times I'm like, I want to calm down and rest and relax. Other times I want to feel energetic and empowered. And so, I'm going to be playing some punk rock tunes because this is my jam. Other things that I like to do include reading for 5 to 10 minutes, and I do this to get inspiration, ideas, just tuning into how I'm feeling about whatever is going on in the world. And it doesn't have to be long, it doesn't have to be a whole ass book, but even 5 minutes of reading something that you find interesting could be helpful. And this is something that I'm doing all the time. Another thing that I love to do is writing, and I do this for about 15 minutes, and this helps me to clear my head. Again, I get to discover what's going on inside me, what I'm thinking about. It helps me to track ideas and things that I'm curious about, and it's one of my favorite activities. And it doesn't have to be super religious, and you don't have to be hard about it. It could just be an exploration, an invitation to clear your head and just tuning with yourself. So the lesson here is that for me, even 5 minutes of creativity help me to stay connected to myself, feel more energized and grounded. So now I want to ask you, what's one small playful way that you can bring creativity into your daily routine? Next, let me share with you some of the creative rituals that I protect and why they matter. Some of my favorite practices, the practices that I find most nourishing, include art journaling, expressive painting, collage, loose drawing, journaling, and I make time for them even when life gets busy. So the way that I tend to think about my week is I think about the work days and the weekend, right? And so during the work days, I focus on all the outward facing work. Like I said, I work a day job, I run my business, I'm coaching clients, I'm doing client work, I am creating content, creating this podcast. And during the weekend, I try to leave unstructured time for me. And what I mean by unstructured time is basically having a day where the plans are not super rigid, where I can come and go as I please and do whatever I feel like doing that day. So it could be maybe hanging out with a friend, maybe it's reading, maybe I just want to paint, maybe I just feel like researching something that I'm really into in that moment. And knowing that I have that flexibility is something that I look forward to every week. So I don't have to wait until the end of the year to feel like I have some time for me and my own explorations. The other thing that happened once I made the decision to start using my creativity as a tool for my well-being, for my self-care, instead of trying to earn my self-worth, is that I stopped trying to master technique and I started to prioritize connecting with myself, tuning into my inner wisdom, my intuition. And what I found is that it made me feel way happier. It made me feel like it was something that I looked forward to because it truly became about me feeling good about myself and enjoying my time doing art. And this makes it easy to show up constantly and regularly. And when you enjoy something, you don't have to force it. You don't have to convince yourself that it's good for you. It's more about building the habit and giving yourself permission to not always do it perfectly, to To tell you the truth, there's times when I show up for 5 minutes or 15 minutes because that's all the time that I have because I've had a really long day where I did a lot of things. But even those 5 minutes are so worth it. And I look forward to it. And I know that I'm going to feel better afterwards. And there's never been a time when I created that I regretted it or that I told myself, that was a waste of time. If anything, I want to do more of it. And I regretted not starting earlier. At this point, the biggest hurdle that I ran into when it comes to my creative process, my creative journey, was letting go of the guilt that I felt for putting my needs first. At the core of prioritizing our creativity, what we're doing, what we're saying is, my joy matters, my feelings matter, how I feel matters. And this was really hard as somebody who grew up being a people pleaser, always putting everyone else's needs first, always worrying about what everyone else was thinking or feeling about what I was doing. So, this is the practice to choose ourselves over and over, even though there's always something else asking for our time and our attention. When we sit down and spend time with ourselves, we are subconsciously letting ourselves know that we're there for ourselves, that we care about how we're doing. That is what builds our relationship with our creativity, with ourselves, really. And that is my goal with creating, is to have a better relationship with myself, is to be more in tune with what matters to me, because I didn't do it for so long, because this wasn't how I used to live. And so that's the importance of prioritizing time with ourselves. So now it's your turn. I want to ask you, if you could carve out 30 minutes for a creative ritual, what would that be? What would that look like? Now I want to share a little bit about how I create space for creativity without feeling like I should be doing something else. So this is much more about like the mindset shift that I had to make in order to make this happen. And the first thing that I had to work through was letting go of perfectionism and productivity. And like I have been talking about throughout this episode, this was all about letting go of achieving, of constantly having to improve, of focusing on mastering a technique, and instead focusing on the process of creating, on having fun, and letting creativity be a form of active rest. The biggest shift happened when I allowed myself to play and experiment more without expectations. As an artist, as a creative, my biggest nightmare had been to make ugly art. One day I finally tackled it head on, and I started to make things that I didn't really like on purpose. And at first it wasn't fun and I didn't enjoy it. I felt really icky about it. But as I did it more and more, I came to realize that it wasn't that serious, that it wasn't that deep. And I was able to sit with whatever I created and not judge it or not feel this urge to want to throw it away and get rid of it. I could just sit with it and let that be okay. And there's something really healing about that. And that is how I'm discovering my true voice as an artist. And I'm having a great time while at it. And this is something that I didn't think was possible for such a long time, because I felt like I always had to struggle and it always had to be hard. And this is the part that I want to help you get to much faster without having to struggle so much, because um really this is what it comes down to. You can spend years and years learning, but at some point, like I said before, you have to let go and trust yourself and let yourself express, which is why we wanted to do this in the first place. So the focus became much more about learning about myself and how I felt as I created, and this is what makes it sustainable and enjoyable for the long term. Some of the other things that I had to work through were setting boundaries around my creative time, and that meant taking breaks, sometimes having to block time for my creativity, especially on really busy weeks, and letting people know that I was going to be unavailable so that I wouldn't have any distractions. The thing that happens after you do that, though, is that resistance will still show up. It did for me. And some of the things that I did to work through this resistance was to set an intention for my creative time, whether it was just I want to relax or I want to play, I just want to do something creative. Two was establishing some warm up activities that I could go to so I wouldn't have to be thinking about what to do to get me started. And that sometimes can be anything between meditation, doodling, or just making ugly art. And I also like to have my creative tools ready and available. And this is helpful because I used to be that person who used to hide her color pencils and her art materials in a box, and I would forget about them, so they would never get used. Now I try as much as possible to have things at arm's reach, and that also serves as an invitation for me to sit down and create. The last thing that I want to mention is rest. Rest is one of those things that I just recently started to adopt in the last few years, but it's something that has really made a positive impact in my creativity, my creative journey in general. It is what makes creativity sustainable. For me, rest hasn't always been easy because I have associated rest with just being still and not doing anything. And this is hard for me as a neurodivergent person. What this means is that I've had to learn to tune into myself and figure out what I need in the moment. If I've had a week where there was a lot of socializing, where my routine got interrupted because I had to take care of things that were unexpected, often what I want to do is walk away from everything, be by myself, and connect with how I feel. And the best way that I have found to do this is through my creativity. And I love this so much because I can just sit down, put on a movie, and just create and have a really great time with myself. And that recharges me. That's my form of rest. So now it's your turn. What is a mindset shift that you would have to make to allow yourself to create without feeling like you should be doing something else? We are now nearing the end of this episode, and I want to share my final takeaway, which is that creative self care is personal, and it's okay if you need to take time to experiment and figure out what you need and what you like. Enjoy the process and don't put too much pressure on yourself. Thank you so much for listening. And if you enjoyed it, please subscribe and hit like if you are watching on YouTube. Also, sign up for my newsletter. This is the best way for us to stay connected and for you to be the first to hear about my latest offerings. And if you would like to explore ways that you could start to infuse creativity into your daily routine, whether you're just starting to reconnect with your creativity or need help establishing a nourishing creative habit, I would love to help you. You can sign up for a free 30-minute discovery session to help you explore how to get started. You can find the link in the show's description. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will talk to you on the next one. Until then, stay creative. Bye.